Yo everyone, the last UFC event of the year is here, and UFC Fight Night Covington vs Buckley takes place this weekend, and I think this card overall has a lot of good matchups on it, a lot of relatively close fights in my opinion, so stay tuned because I will definitely be adding a few fighters in my confident picks list this card, so look out for who they might be. I also want to say that I appreciate any nice comments on my previous prediction video, so thank you to everyone who showed some love on it. We are covering the entire card from the prelims to the main event, and as always, timestamps are in the description and the comment section below if you want to see any fight in particular. The first fight of the card is Josefine Knutsson versus Piera Rodriguez, and honestly, a tougher pick than I originally thought before I started researching for this fight card. Originally, I was just going to snap pick Josefine Knutsson. She has been looking pretty solid on the feet, definitely a talented WMMA fighter, but she did get out grappled and controlled by Julia Palastri in her fight, and that really does worry me. It worries me because Piera Rodriguez fights very similar to Julia Palastri, and if she's able to secure top position over Knutsson in this fight, and she does it consistently, I could see her edging out a decision win here. But ultimately, even saying all this, I will be going with Josefine Knutsson to get this one done, but I do think this fight is a lot closer than the odds say, and it should be around even money. Josefine is definitely a talent on the feet, and if she had the takedown defense of a Jose Aldo, I would 100% agree with the odds here, but we will just have to see how the fight plays out this time. Hoping she stuffs the takedowns of Rodriguez, Josefine Knutsson is the pick. Moving on to Davey Grant versus Ramon Taveras. This is another tough fight to pick. Davey Grant is a slight underdog, but I like his chances in this fight. I don't usually like picking older fighters to win fights, and is returning to the octagon after a year and 5 months away, but he has a great skill set, and he looked great in his recent fights. Even the fights he lost against Daniel Marcos and Adrian Yanez, he arguably won those fights, especially the Daniel Marcos fight that I watched. I thought he looked great with his kicks and overall output in that fight. He does really have a great ability to mix it up on the feet. I also think that Ramon Taveras can be quite one-dimensional. He's a predominant boxer who is actually quite slick on the feet and does counter very well, but that really is all he has to his game for the most part, and he does get hit a lot more than I like in his fights. I can see Davey Grant keeping a distance well in this fight, and being able to win with his kicks and overall volume in this fight, and edge out a decision win over Ramon Taveras in this one. There is a world where Ramon Taveras wins this fight, but I only see it happening if he really hurts Davey Grant and puts him away. I don't really see him winning a decision. I think a good game plan for Ramon Taveras would be to try to counter Davey Grant with a big punch off one of Davey Grant's kicks. That might be the way to catch him here, but regardless, going with an underdog here already in Davey Grant to get this one done, most likely by decision. Moving on to Miranda Maverick versus Jamey-Lyn Horth. I think I'm going to go with Miranda Maverick in this one, and I will be adding her to my confident picks list as well. I honestly believe she's quite solid. She's willing to push hard for positions as well in the grappling, and she's quite tough when going into some exchanges on the feet. I think she most likely will be able to control Jamey-Lyn Horth in this fight with her grappling and be able to win a clear decision at the end of the fight. She's just a level above in each avenue of the fight game in my opinion, and the only way I see Horth winning this fight is by KO or a random armbar submission, which I don't think I can reliably bet on. So quick pick, gonna go with Miranda Maverick to get this one done, probably by decision. Moving on to Miles Johns versus Felipe Lima. Now this is a good fight, and this is a close one too. I think Miles Johns was originally meant to fight Cody Garbrandt, I believe, until that fight fell through, and now he's finding himself matched up against a real challenge in Felipe Lima. I'm not afraid to say this though, but I really doubted Felipe Lima in his debut. I thought he would have lost that fight against Muhammad Naimov because he took that fight on super short notice. He was moving up a weight class from bantamweight to featherweight as well, and he made his debut in the UFC against some tough competition in Muhammad Naimov, but he really proved me wrong. Not only did he win, but he won by a rear naked choke finish. It was a very impressive finish, very impressive young man, and unless Miles Johns catches Felipe Lima with a big overhand, which he does seem to land a lot in some of his fights, I don't see him winning a decision against him. I think Felipe will be the quicker fighter, he will be able to throw more often, and he will land more significant strikes per round than Miles Johns. I really do like Felipe Lima as well. He is quite good, and although Miles Johns isn't the easiest opponent, I still think Felipe Lima gets this one done, most likely by decision win. Felipe Lima is the pick here. Moving on to Sean Woodson versus Fernando Padilla. Alright, now here's the thing with this fight, guys. Sean Woodson is actually really decent. He's underrated, and he does fly under the radar. He's massive for the division as well, although Fernando Padilla is 6'1" at featherweight, which is massive. Sean Woodson will be the taller fighter, which is just insane. I also think he fires more output on the feet for the entirety of the fight, which would aid him here into winning the fight by decision if it got to decision. But here's the thing about Padilla, guys. If you guys have never seen Fernando Padilla fight, this guy is a finisher through and through. He can finish the fight standing, or if it goes to the ground, it doesn't matter. I think he will have the power advantage over Sean Woodson in this fight, and I think he forces him into a firefight here. I think Sean Woodson also can get too creative for his own good sometimes, especially in the first round of fights. I think that's when Fernando Padilla can capitalize on the opening Sean Woodson leaves and hurt him in this fight. I think Padilla hurts Woodson in this fight, finishes him, but I'm not going to say by KO because he does jump on a submission a lot when he's hurt someone. So I'm just going to say by finish. I think he really does get it done. Fernando Padilla is the pick. He should be able to negate the range of Woodson somewhat and close the distance because he's a similar build to Woodson. So that's the pick. Moving on to Joel Alvarez versus Drakkar Klose. Joel Alvarez is definitely a top prospect that a few people are starting to look at more so after his win against Elvis Brenner, including myself as well. He's super well-rounded. He's literally dangerous everywhere, could mess you up on the feet or absolutely destroy you on the ground with his grappling. I do, however, think that Drakkar Klose is definitely solid, definitely should not be a sizable underdog going into this fight. I think the odds should be slightly closer, but I do understand the reasoning for the odds makers making him such a good size favorite. I will be picking him to win this fight. I think he keeps this fight standing for the most part and controls the fight well. Being able to win a dominant decision versus Klose and walking away with the victory, I can just see it happening. I see him keeping his range well with straight punches and kicks and really putting a beat down on Klose from range. I think even if Klose decides to close the distance aggressively, I trust in Joel Alvarez's ability to counter on the back foot as well to earn some respect from Klose early on in this fight. He's quite quick. He's got a pretty decent check left hook. He doesn't mind fighting in the pocket as well if he has to. Joel Alvarez is the pick. We move on to Michael Johnson versus Ottman Azaitar. Man, this fight, I just have a feeling it ends in knockout for either guy, especially if Ottman Azaitar fights how he normally fights. The guy has been getting knockouts throughout his career, but just lost by knockout twice in a row. One of them was to Matt Frivola, and the other one was to Francisco Prado. He's just relentless, and he's always willing to trade, which was his detriment as of recent. Michael Johnson, though, although he is quite cocky and definitely has an ego to him, he is quite technical. He's really fast, and his striking has always been solid throughout his career. Even in a lot of his losses, he was outstriking his opponents in many rounds. I think he will have the technical advantage over Azaitar on the feet. I think he will be the faster fighter in the matchup too. I think he will be able to pick his shots better and come out with a dominant decision over Azaitar in this one. I think Azaitar will fight a bit more safe. Michael Johnson also hits very hard, so it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up countering Azaitar and getting a knockout too if he fights a bit more recklessly. There is a world, like I said at the start of this prediction, if Azaitar presses forward, somehow catches Michael Johnson with his aggressiveness, but Michael is pretty slick, and I think he's more likely to catch Azaitar than vice versa in this matchup. So that's the pick for this fight. Moving on to the main card, Navajo Stirling versus Tuco Tokkos. I'm going to say this right off the bat. I'm picking Navajo Stirling to win this fight, and I will be adding him to my confident picks list as well. The guy is definitely a talent right now in Aussie and NZ MMA, and he currently trains with City Kickboxing Team that has fighters like Israel Adesanya and Carlos Olberg, and Volk trains there from time to time as well. He's powerful, he's accurate, he's got great pressure when closing the distance. I think he gets this one done by first or second round KO or TKO. I don't think Tuco Tokkos is technical enough to make this one scary for Navajo Stirling. And I think if he decides to fight this fight a bit more aggressively, Navajo Stirling, just like Carlos Olberg and Alex Pereira, has a powerful left hook waiting to counter someone like that. Quick pick, gonna go with Navajo Stirling to get this one done by early KO. Moving on to the next fight of the card, Adrian Yanez versus Daniel Marcos. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys, although the odds are pretty close in this fight, I think I'm going to side with Adrian Yanez in this one, and it's a pretty big pick from the heart because I was a big fan of this dude's fight style on his come up, and I was hyped when I was watching his original win streak in the UFC. He just had a bounce back win against Vinicius Salvador, but he had lost to Jonathan Martinez and Rob Font, and that Rob Font loss was by knockout. But I will say this as well. My reasoning is not solely from the heart. I also see an avenue for him winning this fight. I think Daniel Marcos is a lot less active on the feet. He tends to be quite passive and look for his openings carefully before committing to his shots. This is not necessarily a bad thing at all, but I think against a fighter like Adrian Yanez, who's not afraid of a firefight, who has pretty slick boxing in the UFC, and has quite a good output to go along with it, if Daniel Marcos doesn't put Adrian Yanez away in the fight, I can see Yanez being able to get a close decision win by being more active, by being able to land more big shots in this fight, when he's able to close the distance. Daniel Marcos is dangerous on the feet too, so I am going into this fight a bit worried for Yanez, but that's the pick and I'm standing by it. Moving on to Vitor Petrino versus Dustin Jacoby. Now here's the thing, you guys. Dustin Jacoby is a pretty big underdog, and I do understand he's lost 4 out of his last 5. On paper, he's got a 19-9 record, which is pretty bad overall. He's coming off a knockout loss to Dominic Reyes, and he's coming up against quite an imposing fighter in Vitor Petrino, who has quite some solid knockout power and isn't afraid to grapple. But I think I will be picking up the big underdog here, Dustin Jacoby, to get the upset victory in this one, most likely by being able to stay on his toes, skate along the outside, out of range, with some big shots, some big volume, and win this fight with that volume. I honestly think that he beat Khalil Roundtree in that decision loss he had with him, and he looked great in that fight, and Khalil's a fantastic fighter. And I believe Khalil is leagues above Petrino. And Petrino also lost to Anthony Smith by diving his head completely into a guillotine with one of the worst takedown attempts you could make. It almost seemed like he wanted to be submitted, but whatever, guys. I think this fight will potentially test his fight IQ and his ability to deal with a really slick striker. So I do worry about the grappling, but I think Dustin is quite well-rounded as a fighter. I think this is a great bet opportunity since this is such good odds and would be a good return on money if he was able to win. I think I'd personally be chucking something on him, but I'm not quite sure yet. That's the pick, guys. Going with a massive underdog. We move on. Manel Kape versus Bruno Silva. This fight is going to be an absolute banger. I honestly think we could potentially see an upset win for Bruno Silva if Manel Kape decides to trade recklessly here. Bruno Silva has some serious knockout power, and he's another guy who's sort of flown under the radar in the flyweight division. He has some solid boxing skills, but do I think he's skill for skill better than Manel Kape? I do not, unfortunately. As much as I like Bruno Silva, I wouldn't mind picking him as a solid underdog pick here. This is a big step up in competition for him, and Manel Kape will be the more technical striker in this matchup, and he also hits very hard himself. So this is a big test. I think if he ends up dismantling Manel Kape in this fight, I'd happily pick him in a lot of matchups in the future, but I have to go with Manel Kape just with what I've seen so far, the opponents Kape has faced, and things of that nature. Manel Kape's the pick. Moving on to the co-main event, Cub Swanson versus Billy Quarantillo. Now, is Cub Swanson an underdog in this fight? Looks like I'm going to go with another underdog pick, you guys. I've gone quite a few underdogs on this card already, but might as well chuck in another one for good measure. So, jokes aside, he's a small underdog in this one, pretty close to even money, but Cub is still pretty solid for his age, man. He fights well in the stand-up. He arguably beat Andre Fili in his last fight, which was a loss, of course, but I think he should be able to outstrike someone like Billy Quarantillo on the feet in this fight. Billy really does just saunter forward with no regard for safety sometimes, and you can't do that against someone who can hit you hard with a shot like Edson Barboza, who knocked him out bad, and you can't do that, especially against Cub Swanson either. Billy most likely will look to mix in some takedowns in this fight, but Cub Swanson's takedown defense is pretty solid and reliable. I don't see him muscling Cub Swanson to the ground, being able to control him the whole fight either as well, and if he can't do that, there really is no way for him to go except to get a beat down in this fight, and that's what I think may happen here. I think Cub will be able to catch him with some decent shots early, and this will discourage Billy Quarantillo to come forward as hard as he likes in the later rounds, causing him to lose a decision to Cub Swanson, and that's my vision for this fight. That's the pick for the co-main event, and we move on to the main event of UFC Tampa, Colby Covington versus Joaquin Buckley. Now, before I say anything about who I'm picking for this fight, let's go and take a look about who you guys, the subscribers of the channel, picked to win this fight by voting on this week's poll. You guys chose Colby Chaos Covington to win this fight in the main event. Thanks for the likes and engagement on the poll, guys. I appreciate it a bunch. And the question arises, do I agree with you guys? And the answer to that question is, I will be picking against the subscribers' pick for the first time and going with Joaquin Buckley to get this one done. It's a shocker, guys. For the first time, I've not been in agreement with the subscribers, but here's my reasoning for why I'm going with Joaquin Buckley ultimately here. Even though Joaquin Buckley is the favorite, I was surprised that you guys picked an underdog in Colby Covington. I think the man has been so consistently active and is showcasing fantastic performances against some pretty high-level competition here. It's clear that he's coming into his prime with a recent knockout over Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I can understand why he's a favorite in this fight. Colby Covington, on the other hand, he's really only lost to the absolute elite of the division in recent memory. He's almost 37 years old. The man has really shown a discontent for coming back to fighting, and I think he potentially just took this fight because the UFC is paying him well for it. So there is too many question marks around Colby Covington for me to pick him confidently here, and he has been off for a year now too. I think Buckley will be too physical for him, might potentially be able to take down Colby Covington as well with his explosiveness, and I think he will be able to do a lot of damage to Colby in the striking and potentially be able to KO TKO win after rocking Colby with a big shot sometime in maybe round 3 or 4 of this fight. It's hard to visualize because no one has been able to do that to Colby Covington, but he's definitely coming to the tail end of his career, and these things tend to happen sometimes at the end of someone's career. I don't see Buckley getting hurt by Colby in this fight, and if he struggles to get Buckley down, it's hard to imagine him winning this fight. Buckley also has good cardio, so it's hard to imagine him losing this by decision. To lock in the pick, I'm going to go with Joaquin Buckley to get this one done, most likely by later rounds KO TKO, and I can see Colby Covington having moments in this fight, but still getting hurt with some shots in this one. That's the pick, and that's the end of my predictions and breakdown for UFC Fight Night Covington versus Buckley. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, a comment, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel just to show some support for a smaller channel. Thanks for watching, guys, and see you guys next time.